Chapter 6. Tia couldn't wait to see Dr. Cavanaugh today. She was bursting at the seams to tell him she had remembered a little bit more about her past. Specifically that she was from Texas and her mother had a strong Southern drawl. The memory had come to her as she was watching Sweet Home Alabama on the TV the night before, and while an Alabama accent wasn't the same as a Texas drawl, there were similarities. "Well, don't you look chipper today," Dr. Cavanaugh said as he entered her room. Her lips split in a wide smile. "I am. I remembered a little more of my past. I'm originally from Texas." She said the words proudly as if they were a star achievement, which in her case they sort of were. "Is that right?" His eyes did that twinkly thing that set her heart fluttering as he returned her grin. "So a girl from Texas, living in California, but out in Illinois. Maybe you like to travel?" He raised a brow at her as he checked her chart. Maybe, or maybe not. She watched him move to the IV to check the levels. "Detective Graves wasn't too happy that you didn't call him about your visitor." Tia dropped her gaze. "I know. He's already been here this morning. Reamed me pretty good. But I honestly didn't think about it. She said she was a friend and I was in town visiting her. It's not like I would know differently. Detective Graves also took my purse and the note." Dr. Cavanaugh's head snapped toward her. "Note? What note?" Oh, right. She hadn't told him about the note either. "I went through my purse when she brought it back, and I found a note in my purse with a man's name on it. I feel like I was visiting him, but I don't know why." "Perhaps he's someone you're seeing?" Was she imagining his smile looking a little more forced as he asked those words? Was he upset at the thought of her seeing someone? "Regardless, I bet you'll remember soon, and I'm sure Detective Graves will look into him. You did tell him about your feeling, right?" "Yes, I told him." Tia felt like a child being scolded. First Detective Graves had jumped on her case, and now Dr. Cavanaugh? "Good. I'm going to change the bandage on your head now." As he removed the bandage from her head, Tia tried not to focus on the strong angle of his chin or how his touch sent her heart skidding in her chest. She wondered what his beard would feel like under her fingertips. Would it be rough and bristly or softer? And if she touched it, would he lean into her hand or bat it away? He'd told her of his wife's death, but she hadn't asked if he were still single. "You know what? The stitches are healing nicely. I think it's time they got some air." His voice brought her back to reality, and she struggled to keep her voice from betraying her thoughts. "That's good, right?" "It's excellent." His eyes caught hers, and Tia's breath stilled. There was something in his gaze, something more than a doctor caring for a patient. She was sure of it. Should she say something? Ask him if he was single? "Look at that. Your left eye is open a little too." Her breath tumbled out in a sigh, and a tinge of sadness filled her. Of course, he was looking at her eye. He was her doctor, and nothing more. She would do good to remember that. "The cuts on your arms appear to be healing nicely too." "How much longer until I'm released, do you think?" She didn't really want the answer, but felt like she should ask it. With still so much of her life unknown, she felt more comfortable just staying at the hospital and seeing Dr. Cavanaugh every day. When she left, would she have a reason to see him again? "I'm not sure," he said as he ran the thermometer across her forehead. "While you are healing nicely on the outside, I am still concerned about your memory, and though the fever has gone down, it is still slightly above normal. Plus, Dr. North will probably want to look at your foot again before she releases you. Speaking of which, we should check your foot." He finished examining her legs and touched her toes. "Can you feel that?" Tia smiled as she felt his fingers. This time, she didn't have to guess. "I can. Just barely, but I can." "Excellent. That is what I like to hear." He made a few notes in the chart and then turned his full attention back to her. "Did you read your book yesterday?" Tia glanced at the book on the table next to her bed. "A little, but reading with only one eye was giving me a headache. I probably should have asked Edith to read that to me instead of the Bible. Maybe I'll try again today, though, and see if it helps me remember any more." Dr. Cavanaugh smiled and touched her arm. "I think that is a great idea. I'll be back to check on you later." His fingertips pressed just slightly on her arm, only the slightest hint of pressure, but Tia felt there was more there than a simple touch. As he walked out of her room, she rolled her eyes. She was seeing romance where there was none. Perhaps she could write again. Maybe this was why she had become a romance author in the first place. She grabbed the book off the table and opened it to try reading some more. But she had only gotten through a few pages when footsteps in her doorway grabbed her attention. Tia looked up to see Deborah in her room again, but this time the smile was gone and a cold gleam shone from her eyes. "What's wrong, Deborah?" Tia inched her finger up toward the call button. Perhaps it was nothing, but Deborah's expression was setting off alarm bells in her body. "Wrong? Nothing's wrong. I've just come here to finish business." Her voice was as cold and soulless as her eyes. Fear raced through Tia's veins, and she placed her finger on the button. She would press it, but she needed answers first. "Business? What are you talking about? I thought you said we were friends." Deborah's expression turned into a snarl. "Friends?" she spat, before issuing a derisive laugh. "Friends don't sleep with their friend's husband." "What?" Tia's body froze. She hated that she had little memory, but she couldn't imagine herself doing that. "I would never." Deborah cut her off with biting words that carried their own weapons. "How do you know what you would never do? You told me yesterday you had no memory." "I may not remember much, but I don't think I would do that." The thought of that sent such revulsion through her that Tia couldn't believe it was true. "You don't think?" Condescension dripped from Deborah's voice like venom. "Do you want to know where I found the purse that I returned to you yesterday?" Tia fought to remain calm. "You told me I left it on a table in your house." Deborah's predatory smile widened, creating an effect much like the Joker's signature smile on her face. "Yes, on the table in my bedroom. So if you weren't sleeping with my husband, how do you propose it got there?" "I have no idea, obviously." "Well, then I guess my version is the only one that matters, but I'm done being the cheated on wife." From within the bag, she withdrew a gun, and with shaky hands, she pointed it at Tia. Tia pressed the call button, hoping someone would see or hear it before Deborah shot her. She had no idea if the woman was a good shot or if the obvious nervousness would allow her to miss, but Tia couldn't move, so rescue was her only option. "Why did you say we were friends?" Tia asked, hoping to buy a little time. "I needed an excuse to see what room you were in and check out the security at the hospital. I had planned to kill you yesterday, but then you had that busybody old woman in here, so I had to adjust my plan. We'd never officially met, so I didn't think you would recognize me, unless you paid attention to the pictures of me all over the house. But you were probably too busy with my husband to do that, weren't you?" Another image flashed into Tia's mind, and she saw herself picking up a picture of Deborah and Rico. "You're married? Why did you invite me up here if you were married?" "You never said it bothered you," he said, stepping closer to her. "Put the gun down, ma'am." Dr. Cavanaugh's voice brought both relief and frustration as the flashback she had been seeing vanished from her mind. Deborah turned to look at him briefly before returning her attention to Tia. "No, she slept with my husband, and now she's going to pay. I know how distressing that can be, but is it worth spending the rest of your life in prison?" Dr. Cavanaugh's voice was calm, and he inched toward Deborah slowly. "She deserves to die. If she did what you claim, then she deserves punishment, yes, but retribution is not ours to dole out." Tia looked at him. She hoped he didn't really believe Deborah's words. She couldn't stand the thought of him thinking so poorly of her. "She did!" Deborah screeched shrilly, and the hand holding the gun began to shake. "I found her purse in my bedroom. I've known he was having an affair for a while, always off on his business meetings, but I never knew who it was until I found her purse." "Deborah, is your husband's name Rico?" Tia asked. She knew without asking the question that it was, but she hoped to draw Deborah's attention long enough for Dr. Cavanaugh to overpower her. "You know it is." She glanced quickly at Tia before returning her gaze to Dr. Cavanaugh. You see, she admits it. I don't remember him, Tia said, though that was a tiny lie. She had remembered talking to him just now, but there was no need to share that. And I definitely don't recall sleeping with him. But I found a crumpled piece of paper in my purse with his name and a time on it. Hesitation flickered in Deborah's eyes, but she didn't lower the gun. That proves it then. You were meeting with him. That only proves a meeting, Dr. Cavanaugh said. Perhaps they were meeting about something else. In my bedroom? A hysterical edge colored her voice, and she took a deep breath. No, she was sleeping with him, and if I don't punish her, who will? Her hand wavered as she turned to look at Tia again. It wasn't long, but it was long enough for Dr. Cavanaugh to knock the gun out of her hands and tackle her to the ground. What are you doing? Deborah screamed as she writhed on the ground. She's the criminal, not me. A moment later, security rushed in and handcuffed Deborah before leading her out of the room. Her screams carried down the hall and echoed in Tia's ears long after she was gone. Are you okay? Dr. Cavanaugh asked, coming to Tia's side. Tia ignored his question. He could see that she hadn't been physically injured, and posed her own in return. What's going to happen to her? I don't know. They'll take her to the police, and I'm sure Detective Graves will see if she owns a black Ford truck, or knows someone who does. It certainly sounds as if she had a vendetta for you. Her eyes found his, and she stared into the depths that had once held kindness and now held questions. Do you think I really did that? What she said? She needed him not to believe it. Tia still didn't feel that behavior was like her, but the purse was hers, and the crumpled paper proved she'd scheduled a meeting with the woman's husband. Plus, there had been that tidbit she'd remembered. She thought she'd sounded angry and confused at finding out he was married, but she couldn't explain why her purse would have been in the woman's bedroom if something illicit wasn't going on. I don't know. It's not my place to judge anyway. The question clearly made Dr. Cavanaugh uncomfortable, and he steered his gaze away from her face. Did she say anything else to you? Tia closed her eyes and tried to remember the words. Just that she came yesterday to see what the security in the hospital was like, and to see if I would recognize her name. She planned to kill me yesterday, but Edith was in here. Tia couldn't keep the intense sadness and disgust out of her voice. What kind of a person was I? Dr. Cavanaugh cleared his throat and ran the back of his fingers down his cheek. Maybe it's not what it seems. You said you had a paper with meeting details? Yeah, his name, address, and a time. Well, I'm no expert, but I don't know many people who schedule trysts like that. So maybe he was an associate or something. He was guessing, making up options to make her feel better, but Tia appreciated the effort. Even if he was an associate, I don't know why I'd be in his bedroom, which is where she claimed she found my purse. Dr. Cavanaugh opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. It's okay, Tia continued. You should get back to your other patients. I'm fine now. Of course. Call if you need anything. Though they were the same words he often said before leaving, they sounded different this time, and Tia couldn't help feeling saddened by the fact she had disappointed him. Brody stood outside the police station, gathering his courage to go in. He didn't even know why he was here, especially if Deborah's words were true, but the need to help Tia still burned strong within him. Rachel had often accused him of having a knight in shining armor complex, and perhaps she had been right, because here he was trying to defend a woman who might have been in an affair. He supposed she could have had a different personality before the accident. It certainly happened with traumatic brain injuries, but he just didn't believe the woman in his hospital could have done what Deborah claimed. Before he could grasp the handle, the door swung open, and Jordan stared at him from the other side. Brody, what are you doing here? I was hoping I could talk to you about Tia and the woman from the hospital earlier. Jordan looked over his shoulder and then back at Brody. Not here. I'm headed over to Fire Dreams. Meet me there and I'll tell you what I know, but it isn't much. Brody nodded and returned to his car. Not much was better than what he knew now, which consisted of more questions than answers. 10 minutes later, he sat in a booth with Jordan, a glass of water in front of each of them and a basket of chips in the middle. The place was hopping, having recovered nicely from the spoiled opening a few days before, and Jordan kept glancing around as if realizing he should be helping rather than sitting and talking. So the lady from the hospital is indeed Deborah Reardon. If you or Tia had told us about her yesterday, we could have looked into her sooner. She's clean, but her husband Rico has a few questionable connections. What kind of questionable connections? Brody asked. On paper, he's the head of a publishing company, which might explain the connection to Tia, but we found some unusual activity with some known drug dealers. Nothing that points to him being directly involved, and narcotics has never been able to pin anything on him, but we're widening our search to be sure. Brody nodded and snagged a chip. Drugs? Really? This image just didn't jive with the woman he'd gotten to know the last few days. Tia said she had a meeting with Rico, but she doesn't seem like the type to be into drug deals. Jordan took a sip of his water. Maybe she isn't, but I did a little more research on her today. It appears she stayed under the radar, at least recently. Evidently, a few months ago, she kind of lost it after trying to damage the reputation of a fellow romance author, Ava McDermott. She sent photos to tabloids and appeared on a few talk shows, claiming the relationship Ava was in was a fake one. I don't know why anyone would fake a relationship, but maybe if you're a public figure, it's more important. What? Brody knew he didn't know Tia well, and she could have been awful before the accident, but he couldn't fathom the sweet Texas girl doing such a thing. Oh dear, did he just call her sweet? Maybe he was becoming attached to her. Jordan shrugged. Well, maybe the head injury changed her, or maybe she changed after the incident. She failed to do much except soil her own reputation. Regardless, it's clear Tia did know Rico. There's no other reason Deborah would have come after her. Perhaps she was talking to him about new publishing opportunities. We just don't know any more than that. Is there a chance she was having an affair with him as his wife claimed? Brody asked before taking a drink of his water. He didn't want this to be true. He knew Tia was just a patient, and she lives in California, and he shouldn't care about her personal life. But he did. That I can't speak to, yet. But we'll be looking into Rico more. Jordan shook some salt on a chip before stuffing it into his mouth. And what about the black truck? Did it belong to Deborah? Jordan shook his head as he finished chewing. No, neither she nor her husband appear to own one. So someone might still be after Tia. It's possible, or it could just be that the accident was just that, an accident. But you don't believe that, do you? Brody asked. No, I don't. It's just a gut feeling, but I don't. I've talked with the hospital about posting a security guard outside her door as well. Jordan looked around again and waved at someone across the room. I have to help out here, but I promise to keep you in the loop of what we find. Thank you. Brody stayed and ate a late dinner alone, but his thoughts weren't on the food. They were on the blonde woman, whose present didn't seem to match her past.